a lot of these guys, I might not know them personally enough to be like, oh, hey, how's the wife and kids or something like that. But I would certainly know what kind of tricks they do and what they kind of communicate through their skating and what kind of parts. And now it's like, what was your latest Instagram bit? So it's a bit more current, and you can stay in contact currently with people who you don't know personally. And those are the areas where you can like connect with them and talk to them about. Which is really cool.
That's a really good point. And we were talking about that before, about like, and I'd like to hear you kind of actually grow on that idea. Like people like talking about, it's skating is a form of communication. This is the way that we communicate with each other without speaking. And it actually reminds me of a time, like before I met Dominic Sagona, I like didn't like Dominic Sagona. I was like, this guy's so cocky. Look at how cocky he is through his skating.
I know some people like that too.
Like
I
do you know what I mean?
Them to
and then I met him and I loved him, and we were like,
how can you not love Dominic?
Great friends. Yeah, exactly. But like, there's basically like a form of communication there, like or like an expression or whatever like that. But
you nailed it, I think, and I think somebody like Dominic's like a perfect example of like a guy who goes the extra mile with his gestures and with his aesthetic kind of presentation to communicate something else. I mean, I know Dominic as well, and I think you always associate Dominic Sagona with one of like the ideal, like ultimate styles in skating.
Totally.
I think the technique of looking through the window with the Soyal was something that was really like closely
looking through the window. I never heard that.
Yeah, like with the Soyal, like you just look through the window.
Like it's almost not like an alley trick. You know what I mean?
I think it's a thing.
Totally.
I think it's a thing.
I never heard that. I never heard that phrase.
I think your body naturally wants to do it, but I think like guys like Dominic would sort of take it to an extra level, and it would be a little bit more exaggerated. And guys like him are known for certain techniques of style, rather than the actual technique of doing the trick. It's the technique of style.
Totally.
And he's a bit of an innovator and a torchbearer in that sense as well.
Totally.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, hit and miss sometimes too. I mean, maybe the t-shirts around the head and that kind of stuff.
But he was experimenting. He was willing to like, and I think DL had that same thing. They were just like willing to like take these things, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But like when you take that approach, like you're gonna really land on some amazing stuff.
And DL actually, and he presented that stuff through his skating, but he also spoke about it too, because at the end of Brain Fear Gone, isn't it? That sort of long school line. Yeah. It was funny actually, just on a little segue. Michael Briggs talking about Instagram, talking about like the sort of what are we communicating through skate media and through skate tricks and stuff like that. He's really like interesting guy who puts together like really strange videos and cool tricks, and it's kind of funny. But he actually chopped together recently this sort of slightly sort of weird kind of sort of scene of like Dustin Latimer doing that skate line at the end of at the school at the end of like Brain Fear Gone.
He like recreated it?
Yeah, he recreated it, and then he spoke over it. And he was just like, yeah, like skating's like so meaningful.
Did he say the same shit, or he said like
was he meant to like mock it, or was he?
No, I don't think he was mocking it. I mean, I think like at the time when Dustin came out and started speaking about skating being this like form of expression, and there's like communication nested in your body's form, and that it's just freedom of expression, and that these like themes in skating that like at the time we kind of took the mick of that a little bit. I remember just thinking, maybe our crew, the guys who I was skating with, certainly took the mick out of that a little bit and thought it's a little bit pretentious, or what are you talking about? How can skating be something like that, something deep like that? And I think it just took years and years of further practice to like even get, and shows how ahead of the time somebody like Dustin Latimer actually is, because I can totally resonate with those sorts of ideas now. And just to speak on like the window thing, like looking through the window, and I think it's people's gestures, right? So like your body language and how you gesticulate and gesture, you try to make a point, you accentuate the point with your hands, right? Or maybe with your facial expressions, with your eyebrows, whatever. You've got dimples, you've got wrinkles, whatever it is, and you accentuate points with your body, basically.
Totally.
So, the cool thing about skating is you can kind of accentuate you can accentuate what you're trying to say in this really ambiguous, abstract way with the certain gestures that you incorporate in your tricks. So for instance, I could take you, right? Something that I think about you all of the time, like you might land a trick and you just flick your hair, right? It's just something that I think about with you when you like bust a hammer or some shit, just like, fuck, this shit, you know, like, and that whole like fuck this shit, you know, like it's just that release of doing something that was either potentially dangerous, you'd thought about loads, you know, you'd built up in your mind, you'd made this trick bigger than it maybe was. Right? So it's those gestures that punctuate the significance of the trick for you, the rider. And I like to look at that kind of shit when I watch skate videos and I watch people's sections, because that's the communication element of it, that's the subjective element of it, because you can take away what you want from somebody skating. It's not just a trick.
Totally.
You know, it's a language in a way. I mean, what else is it? You know?
It's funny because like first of all, like that's, you nailed that, like right on. But like
definitely.
what, going back to like Dominic, when I saw it, like in, like you said, like taking the style and running with it, like taking the intention and having like I thought, like, because Dominic was clearly like trying to like be this, I was like, oh, he's trying, like that's bad. Like
I
that
know
he's
what you mean by that.
trying. Like, and I was like, so that's where my mind was associated, because I'm like, that's not real. You gotta be real. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
And that way of thinking. But like you said, like with DL, when you're like, oh, you started understanding, you're like, I was like, oh, like I get it now, because like that actually applies to all these different things. Like, and the same, like you could apply it to like, you know, music, like in terms of like getting technically good, between just like accenting and just being like, kind of making that thing be seen, like, you know, whatever. It's hard to describe, but just like making that thing be like, this is like what I'm doing and how I'm doing. I don't know.
It's that flavor.
It's that expression. Like it's that.
And sometimes,
you know?
and sometimes you've just got to like challenge the ideas of what was. You know, and another guy, you know, and that's what it is. And you know, everyone talks about progression and evolution, and you know, that's not just doing, you know, difficult, technical, dangerous tricks on said kink rails or down rails, you know, rails, whatever, right? It's how you do it. And it's also, you know, take for instance, you know, another quite legendary and in equal measure divisive figure in skating, such as like Ollie Short, right? Arguably the GOAT, right? Arguably the GOAT. You know, and I've grown up with Ollie. He lives, you know, around the corner from where I live, and you know, all of the guys in Southwest London, where I'm from, we're all very close with Ollie. You know, and you know, he went through different eras and sort of epochs of his own skating, almost attaching to different groups of people. And you know, he would sort of model himself, you know, the Clockwork Orange outfit, for instance.
So
I mean,
genius.
that's just genius and just scorched into the memory of most people.
Totally.
You know, or
When you
certainly
think
of our
Ollie,
generation.
That's what makes people memorable too. Certain things like that, and you might criticize it at first, but you're still talking about it, you know, 15 years later or whatever it is.
Because it punctuated what. It accentuated whatever he was going for. And I don't think it's still obvious what Ollie was going for. You know, I mean, he's a musician, he's an artist, he's an interesting guy. He likes like a wide palette of music, and I mean, loved Pink Floyd, you know, like had this sort of Sex Pistols kind of phase, kind of wanted to embody like some of the, I don't know, culturally important musical aspects of like London and of England, I guess.
He did,
right?
definitely did.
And he was definitely like a pioneer in that way, because he was like one of the first guys taking those risks when it was such like a hip hop thing, you know.
He was like one of the first.
He was taking that risk, like of
he was like 80s rock,
which took balls, man. Like, you know, it took.
And he was also one of the guys that was, you know, like triple XL, ludicrously baggy trousers, and you know, bleach blonde highlight hair. So he went through noticeable eras of skating, of his style, of how he looked, and it was deliberate and intentional, and it created like attention, it created talking points. You know, the guys who are from London who knew him were just like, oh, so he's kind of like trying to do that now. He's doing this now. He looks like this now. But I don't know. I mean, Ollie's skills were self-evident. You know, spoke for itself. So it's like you can't hate on Ollie ever for trying hard or for trying to do something.
I will
like
say
that.
this: there's a whole aspect of his skating that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with. Like they just know him as that, but like that earlier stuff, he did all of that stuff that everyone else was doing. He did all.